Welcome to English Through History. If you enjoy the content, please subscribe. It helps us to create more content and it shows us we're moving in the right direction. In today's episode, we are looking at Portugal's 1974 Carnation Revolution, a hugely significant day for all Portuguese and their former colonies. The revolution brought an end to dictatorship and an oppressive authoritarian regime. Amazingly, this revolution was largely peaceful and brought an end to the power of the Estado Novo regime, a party that had been in power since 1933. It completely restructured the country's social, political, and colonial power, and from this event emerged the democracy we see in Portugal today. The revolution began with a military coup led by officers who were opposed to the regime's colonial wars in Africa and the authoritarianism of the regime. The coup was relatively bloodless and largely peaceful, with the Portuguese people taking to the streets in support of the military's action. The soldiers who led the coup were not interested in taking power for themselves, but instead wanted to create a democratic government that would represent the interests of all Portuguese people. The revolution had its roots in the long-standing grievances of the Portuguese people, who were tired of the economic stagnation and the political repression of the Estado Novo regime. The regime was also facing mounting pressure from international organizations, such as the United Nations, to end its colonial wars in countries like Angola and Mozambique. The coup was led by a group of young officers who had been inspired by the ideas of socialism and democracy. They formed the Armed Forces Movement, the MFA, which quickly gained support from other military units and the Portuguese people. The MFA established a provisional government, and this government quickly set about dismantling the authoritarian structures of the Estado Novo regime. Censorship was lifted, political prisoners were released, and the secret police were disbanded. The MFA also began negotiations with the African liberation movements, which eventually led to the end of Portugal's colonial wars. One of the defining moments of the revolution was the appearance of Carnations in the lapels of soldiers and civilians on the streets of Lisbon. This was a spontaneous gesture of solidarity and celebration that came to symbolize the peaceful and democratic nature of the revolution. The revolution also had a profound impact on Portuguese society. The dreaded secret police were disbanded, and this led to a flowering of culture and creativity as artists and intellectuals were freed from censorship and repression. Prior to this, the government and the secret police would install agents throughout society, and every conversation had the risk of being overheard and arrests and torture to follow if apprehended, resulting in many Portuguese citizens being extremely wary of saying things in front of strangers and even friends. However, the revolution was not without its challenges. The MFA, which had been created to oversee the transition to democracy, was faced with a number of obstacles, including opposition from conservative forces within the military and society at large. There were also tensions between left-wing and right-wing factions within the Provisional Government, which eventually led to the collapse of the government in 1975 by pro-communist forces who wanted to take advantage of the tension and create a communist country. However, this was countered quickly by pro-democracy forces who regained power. Despite these challenges, the legacy of the Carnation Revolution continues to be felt in Portugal and beyond. It inspired other movements for democracy and human rights in Europe and Latin America, and it remains a powerful symbol of the power of peaceful revolution to bring about positive change. In summary, here are the consequences still felt from this revolution today. So the first one is democratization. So as mentioned, the Carnation Revolution marked the end of the Estado Novo dictatorship and paved the way for the establishment of a democratic government. The revolution ushered in a period of political and social reforms, including the adaptation of a new constitution in 1976 that guaranteed civil liberties and human rights. The second consequence is decolonization. The revolution brought an end to Portugal's colonial wars in Angola, Mozambique, and Guinea-Bissau. The new government negotiated the independence of these territories, which led to a significant shift in Portugal's role in the world. The third consequence are the economic reforms. So the revolution led to significant economic reforms, including the nationalization of key industries and the introduction of land reform. These reforms aim to reduce social and economic inequalities and promote social justice. The fourth consequence are connected to women's rights. So the revolution had a profound effect on women's rights in Portugal. The new constitution granted women equal rights, and new laws were passed to improve access to education, healthcare, and employment for women. The fifth consequence is the cultural changes. So this revolution led to a significant cultural shift in Portugal. As mentioned earlier, censorship was lifted, and artists and intellectuals were free to express themselves. The revolution also led to the emergence of new cultural movements, such as the cinema novo and the popular music genre known as música de intervenção, music that is connected with social change. The last consequence is the international influence. So the Carnation Revolution had a significant influence on other countries, particularly in Latin America. The peaceful overthrow of an authoritarian regime inspired similar movements for democracy and human rights across the region.